There was a half-finished cup of tea on the kitchen counter. Still warm, steam rising faintly. But the house. It was too quiet. The kind of silence that grips your skin before your mind registers what's wrong. I called out. Once, then again. Nothing. The garage door was locked from the inside. The backyard untouched. But the basement door, it was open just enough to set off alarm bells in my chest. I made my way down slowly, each step feeling heavier than the last. And then I saw him. My son. Mason. His body crumpled near the boiler, pale and still. Scrapes on his knees, a red welt rising above his eyebrow. Unconscious. For a few heartbeats, everything inside me stopped. My breath, my legs, even the blood in my veins froze. Then the scream tore out of me. I dropped to my knees, shaking him gently. Mason, sweetheart, wake up. Please, baby, can you hear me? And then, behind me, there was a sound. A spoon tapping softly against a ceramic mug. I turned. At the top of the stairs stood my husband, Alan, leaning casually on the railing. Calm. Too calm. A cup of tea in his hand. The same hand that once held Mason's tiny fingers on his first day of preschool. He disobeyed me, Alan said evenly, like we were discussing something as trivial as chores. Actions have consequences. That's how I handle things. I couldn't move. Couldn't scream. My hands kept checking Mason's pulse while my eyes locked on Alan's face, refusing to blink. If you think it's necessary, call a doctor, he added, sipping his tea. He'll be fine. This will teach him. And I did call. Not because I believed him, but because somewhere inside, I knew. This wasn't the first time something inside Alan had snapped behind that icy calm. When the doctor arrived, he didn't waste a second. He moved quickly, checked Mason's breathing, his pulse, examined his head. Then he paused. His jaw clenched. He turned to me, lowered his voice and placed a firm hand on my arm. Before your husband comes back in, call the police. Immediately. There was something in the doctor's tone that cut deeper than fear. Something colder. Something that said, this isn't the first boy I've seen like this. But it better be the last. I didn't hesitate. My hands were trembling, but the urgency in the doctor's voice overpowered everything else. When the dispatcher answered, I kept it short. Honest. Direct. There's a child, my son. He's unconscious. I believe he was assaulted. The man responsible is still in the house. They asked if I felt safe. I lied. I said yes. Because I knew if I said no, they might take their time. When I ended the call, the doctor gave me a silent nod. He stayed beside Mason, whispering reassurances into that broken quiet. I went upstairs. Alan was still at the kitchen table. The tea had gone cold. His phone rested in front of him. He looked up and smiled, like we were just two tired parents on a lazy Sunday afternoon. He'll be fine, he said again. You'll see. He's just like me, stubborn. I stood across from him, fists clenched, 100 things burning in my throat. I could have screamed. I could have thrown something. But I didn't. Because in that moment I understood. This wasn't a one-time outburst. This wasn't a lapse in control. This was who he truly was. Maybe who he had always been. I called someone, I said softly, just to be safe. He tilted his head, annoyed. Over a fall? You're letting emotions cloud your judgment again. That line. He had said it before, about my tears, my instincts, my warnings. And every time, I let it settle into my bones like shame. But not this time. This time, I heard something else behind those words. Control. Justification. Power. I sat across from him, steady. Still. Then whispered. You left a bruise. That's when he flinched. Just slightly. A flicker in his eye. A recalculation. Then, sirens. Distant but getting closer. He stood up too fast. Tell them it was an accident, he said quickly. Tell them he slipped. You were in the hospital for 3 days. You didn't see anything. I looked at him. Really looked. And I didn't see my husband. I saw the man my son had started avoiding. The one he couldn't meet in the eye. Then came the knock. 3 sharp, deliberate beats. Alan opened the door before I could move, his voice shifting into the polite tone he used for strangers. Officers, is there a problem? The taller officer didn't respond right away. His eyes flicked past Alan's shoulder and landed on the doctor, still kneeling by Mason, now fitting an oxygen mask over his face. Something shifted in the officer's expression. We received a report of a child in medical distress, he said. Step aside, sir. Alan didn't move. It's nothing. He tripped. Kids get hurt. His mother's just emotional. That word again. Emotional. Always used like a weapon. Sharp, precise, dismissive. But the officers were already stepping inside. The second one looked right at me. Ma'am, are you the one who made the call? I nodded. My throat clenched, but then I found my voice. Yes, I did. That's when the spell shattered. Alan laughed. Hi. Hollow. You believe her? She wasn't even here. She just had surgery. She's not thinking straight. But they didn't need to argue with him. Because they had already seen the truth. The taller officer didn't even respond to Alan. He walked directly to the basement door, peered down the steps and saw it. The smear of blood on the stair, the spot where Mason's head had struck the wall. He turned his head slowly and asked, Does this look like the result of a fall to you? The doctor removed his gloves with calm precision. His voice was low, steady, controlled, but laced with something sharper. No, he said. These injuries suggest direct trauma. This was not an accident. Alan's expression changed. The forced smile disappeared. You're not a detective, he snapped. You're just a medic. The doctor didn't flinch. And you're just a man who thinks bruises don't tell stories. That sentence, those words, they hung in the room like fog. The kind that doesn't clear. Alan turned to look at me then. The charm had evaporated. No smile, no mask. Just his eyes. Cold, measuring. I told you how I handle things, he said under his breath. You made your choice. But so had I. Officers, I said firmly, louder now, steady. I'd like him removed from the home. They didn't hesitate. One asked him calmly to sit down. When Alan refused, the officers stepped in without raising their voices. Hands on his arms, practiced and composed. And just like that, the man who once declared himself the head of our household was sitting on the front porch in handcuffs. Neighbors gathered, drawn by the sirens. I didn't meet their eyes. I simply closed the door. Slowly. The house was quiet again. But not the same kind of quiet as before. This silence pulsed with something else. Maybe it was relief. Or the absence of fear. That night, Mason was admitted to the children's wing at the hospital. I rode in the passenger seat of the ambulance while the doctor stayed in the back with my son. My hands didn't stop trembling. Not out of panic, but from the weight of everything I hadn't seen sooner. At the emergency desk, they handed me a clipboard filled with forms. Medical authorizations, reports, follow-ups. One box stood out. Was this injury caused by someone you know? I stared at it. Then I checked yes. And I wrote Alan's full name. Clearly. Then underlined it. The detective met me in a small room lined with children's drawings taped to the walls. She wasn't warm, but she wasn't harsh either. Just steady. We have some history on your husband, she said gently. I froze. History. She nodded. Reports from years ago. They're sealed, but flagged. A former girlfriend. A sibling. The charges were dropped. Nothing ever stuck. You're not the first woman who's called. My stomach turned. I placed a hand on my chest. But I married him. The detective didn't say anything. Just looked at me with the kind of eyes that had seen too many women say that same sentence, with the same ache. Do you want to press full charges? She asked. I looked through the glass window into the hallway. Mason lay still, an oxygen tube in his nose, for dripping slowly into his arm. I could hear Alan's voice in my head. Cold, smooth, calculating. Actions meet consequences. I turned back to her. Yes, I said. And I want the full weight of the system on his back. She gave a short nod and handed me her card. He'll probably try to reach out. Through family, friends. Guilt. I'm not listening, I said. And I meant it. After the charges were filed, it felt like a cold wind moved through the entire house. Alan's family started calling. His mother's voice trembled as she pleaded, "Please reconsider, it was just a moment." "No," I told her. "It was a mindset." Because moments fade. But mindsets? They stay. They dig in. This wasn't just about protecting Mason anymore. This was about burning the bridge Alan might one day try to walk back across. And I wasn't just lighting one end. I was lighting both. The subpoena came in a thick white envelope. My name was printed on the front. The state seal pressed in gold. It didn't feel real until I touched it. Until I saw Alan's full name again. Defendant Alan J. Reeves, in bold font. The man who once kissed my forehead goodnight. Now just another case number. The court date was set for the following month. In the meantime, everything blurred. There were interviews, evaluations, visits from child services. A counselor met with Mason twice and later told me gently, "He's quiet, but not broken. You got him out in time." That sentence clung to me. You got him out in time. I wanted to believe it. I needed to. But courtrooms don't deal in feelings. They deal in evidence. I sat across from attorneys in beige suits who asked the same questions over and over. Did you ever see signs before? Do you have documentation? Why didn't you leave sooner? That last one always hit the hardest. As if love could be flipped on like a switch. As if fear wore a name tag so it could be easily recognized. But maybe the hardest part? The silence. From the people I thought would speak. Friends who danced at our wedding. His sister, who used to call every Sunday. Even my own cousin, who messaged once, "This is complicated." And then, nothing. Truth makes people uncomfortable. Especially when it wears the face of someone they once trusted. But for every voice that fell away, another rose. Mason's school principal sent flowers. A nurse from the hospital left a voicemail. "Whatever you need, I'm here." And Alan's father, stationed across the country, sent a single line in an email. "You won't be standing alone in that courtroom. I'll be there." And I believed him. Because sometimes strength doesn't roar. Sometimes it just shows up, quiet, steady, when the world tries to knock you loose. I gathered everything. Photos, medical records, written statements. I placed them all in a folder labeled Truth. That was what I was bringing to court. Not revenge. Not anger. Just the truth. And that, I realized, was stronger than anything Alan had ever raised his voice to say. The courtroom didn't look dramatic. It smelled like paper and old carpet. Nothing like the movies. Just a room where lives get sorted into files and facts. I sat at the front, beside my attorney. Across from us, Alan. Blue suit. Fresh haircut. Playing the part of the misunderstood husband. He never looked at me. When the judge entered, everyone stood. The room fell into silence, heavy and sudden. And then it began. They started with the basics. The incident report, the 911 call, the paramedic's testimony. Then the doctor took the stand. Come. Clear. Professional. He explained the injuries. The bruising. The placement. How they didn't line up with a simple fall. How he saw fear in Mason's body language. Even while he was unconscious. Alan's attorney objected to the emotional inference. The judge overruled it. Then it was my turn. I stood. Walked to the center. Felt every eye on me. They asked questions. I answered with facts. No crying. No performance. Just truth. I wasn't in the room when it happened, I said. But I heard what he said afterward. Actions meet consequences. That line made the jury shift. One woman leaned forward. Another shook her head. Then came the hardest part. The video. Not from the basement. From the baby monitor. Footage Alan didn't know was recording. I'd installed it after Mason started waking up screaming at night. And there he was. Alan, standing over our son. His voice cold. "You disobeyed so you don't eat." My jaw locked. My fists clenched. The screen went dark. Silence. And for the first time, Alan cracked. He slumped forward, elbows on the table, face pale. It wasn't over. Not legally. Not yet. But the image had burned itself into the room. Into every person who saw it. This wasn't about whether or not he'd be charged. This was about finally speaking the truth. And no amount of silence could protect him from that anymore. The verdict came faster than I expected. 2 days. Not weeks. Not months. Guilty of misdemeanor child endangerment. Guilty of obstruction. Guilty of emotional abuse under civil statute. He wouldn't go to prison. But the sentence was clear. Probation. Mandatory counseling. No unsupervised contact with minors. And a full restraining order, filed in both my name and Mason's. The judge didn't lecture. He didn't need to. He looked at Alan, the same man who once controlled every conversation at the dinner table, and said, "You broke something in this child that will take years to repair. You damaged trust. That's what you're being held accountable for." The gavel came down. And just like that, the man who obsessed over control had none left. He finally looked at me. First time since the day they arrested him. His mouth opened like he wanted to speak. But I didn't wait. I stood, turned, and walked out. Outside, Alan's father was waiting. No military uniform this time. Just jeans, a worn jacket, and a look I'll never forget. Not pity. Not pride. Just presence. He didn't ask what happened. He didn't need to. I hugged him tighter than I ever had. And for the first time in months, I cried. Not because I was broken. Because I had survived. And so had Mason. That night as I tucked my son into bed, he looked at me, eyes wide and searching. "Is he gone?" he asked. I nodded. "He's gone, sweetheart. And he's not coming back." Mason closed his eyes. And for the first time in so long, he slept without flinching. There's a moment that comes after the storm. No lightning. No thunder. Just stillness. You look around your house and realize, no one's holding their breath anymore. No one's tiptoeing around fear. No one's afraid of the quiet. That's when you know, it's truly over. I kept the folder labeled Truth. Not to dwell, but to remember. Because forgetting is dangerous. Forgetting is how it happens again. Mason's bruises faded. The nightmares stopped. He laughs more now. Not loud but real. The kind of laugh that comes from knowing your joy is safe. I changed the locks. I changed my number. I changed how I measure love. It's not about flowers or apologies. It's about feeling safe enough to say, "I'm scared," and knowing no one will make you feel weak for it. People sometimes ask what finally made me leave. What the breaking point was. It wasn't the bruises. It wasn't even the basement. It was the tea. Still warm. Still steaming on the counter. While my son lay unconscious just feet away. That image. That's what stayed. Because in that moment, Alan wasn't a man. He was proof that cruelty doesn't always scream. Sometimes it whispers. Sometimes it drinks tea and calls it parenting. But not here. Not anymore. Here we build. Here we breathe. Here we choose softness. And we never call it weakness.